Effectiveness of torture for interrogation. Torture has been used throughout history for the purpose of obtaining information in interrogation. Torture, while widely illegal and a violation of international law, has been frequently cited as generating false or misleading information, and lacks scientific evidence supporting its effectiveness. The counterargument claims to point to some specific cases where torture has elicited true information. Historical examples. Judicial use. 17th century. One early writer on the ineffectiveness of torture was Friedrich Spee 1591–1635, a German Jesuit priest, professor, and poet who was most noted as an opponent of trials for witchcraft. He was the first person in his time to present strong written and spoken arguments against torture, especially with regards to its unreliability in obtaining truth from someone undergoing painful questioning. Military use. World War Roman II. After the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War Roman II, the Japanese military tortured a captured American P-51 fighter pilot, Marcus McDilda, to discover how many atomic bombs the Allies had and what the future targets were. McDilda, who knew nothing about the atomic bomb or the Manhattan Project, confessed under torture that the U.S. had 100 atomic bombs and that Tokyo and Kyoto were the next targets. McDilda's false confession may have swayed the Japanese leader's decision to surrender. Korean War. Chinese interrogators tortured U.S. Air Force prisoners of war during the Korean War with the specific goal of eliciting false confessions. After the war, the false confessions led to allegations that the airmen had been brainwashed, and so the United States interviewed the former prisoners of war to collect information on the torture techniques and published the results in 1957. The torture techniques were incorporated into the Survival, Evasion, Resistance and Escape SEER program to train service members to resist torture. 1992 U.S. Army Field Manual. FM 3452 Intelligence Interrogation. The United States Army Field Manual explains that torture is a poor technique that yields unreliable results, may damage subsequent collection efforts, and can induce the source to say what he thinks the interrogator wants to hear. Torture is ineffective at gathering reliable information, and it also increases the difficulty of gathering information from a source in the future. War on Terror and 2003 Invasion of Iraq. False information about a link between Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda was extracted from Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi through torture and was cited by the George W. Bush administration in the months preceding its 2003 invasion of Iraq. That information was frequently repeated by members of the Bush administration, although reports from both the Central Intelligence Agency CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency DIA strongly questioned its credibility, suggesting that al-Libi was intentionally misleading interrogators. Since the revelations in 2004 and 2008 that the President George W. Bush administration authorized the use of torture in interrogations, and that United States personnel have used such practices in interrogations related to the 9/11 attacks and al-Qaeda, both at black sites and at Guantanamo Bay detention camp. In commenting on the use and effectiveness of various torture methods, with a focus on waterboarding, former U.S. Director of National Intelligence Dennis C. Blair wrote in 2009 that high-value information came from interrogations in which these methods were used. However, a Senate committee that investigated claims of useful information being extracted from suspects that underwent enhanced interrogation concluded that critical and valuable information was not obtained using these methods. The 6,700-page Senate Intelligence Committee report on CIA torture also concluded that the CIA had repeatedly and deliberately impeded oversight and misrepresented the effectiveness of torture as an interrogation technique to policymakers and to the public through coordinated leaking of false information. Alex Knapp, a staff writer at Forbes, wrote the following in 2009. Time and time again, people with actual experience with interrogating terror suspects and actual experience and knowledge about the effectiveness of torture techniques have come out to explain that they are ineffective and that their use threatens national security more than it helps. He had written an article about an FBI interrogator who noted that its practice did not include torture. FBI agents had registered strong disapproval of the U.S. military approach. Annette Cisco argues that the torture techniques are specifically designed to make captives pliable and dependent. They are designed to get prisoners to say whatever you want them to say. Many torture survivors report revealing false or incomplete information since their goal was to satisfy the torturer and end the suffering, not to reveal information. The book Pediatricians at War, The Dual Loyalties Challenge by Fritz Ohlhoff explains that to test the effectiveness of torture, researchers would have to ignore the consent of the research subjects.